My name is Mike Paciello. This is CSUN AT TV, and welcome to our first fireside chat. As if we couldn't start with a better fire, literally, our topic today is going to be AI, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Actually, it's AI and accessibility, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if you were here at this morning's keynote, you heard Haben Girma talk about some of the dangers of AI and some of her pragmatic thoughts about what kind of things we need to take into consideration. Well, today we have three experts in the field that are with us. So down here on my left, we have Anthony May. Anthony is with Brown, Goldstein, and Levy. That's a law firm. Where's that based? Based in Maryland?
We're based in Baltimore, Maryland. Based in Baltimore, Maryland, and in the DC region.
Okay, very good. And then Hans Hillen with TPGI, Vispero.
That's right.
Hans, tell me what the P stands for in TPGI.
Stands for Mike Paciello.
Isn't that a coincidence? Paciello. So Hans is, you've been in accessibility working 25 years,
Yeah,
pretty close to
2006.
25? Yeah, so a lot of experience at that level.
And Mike literally used to boss me around.
Yeah,
And now he still does,
yeah, exactly.
even if I don't work for him anymore.
There we go. Good. And we have Mohit, is it Goenka?
Mohit Goenka.
Goenka. Mohit, you're with Yahoo?
I'm with Yahoo, yes. I work on Yahoo Mail and work on the accessibility side of things other than the development and maintenance of the product.
Yeah, very good. So let's just talk a little bit about what each of you do for your respective companies. So Mohit, why don't we go ahead and start with you first?
So I work as Director of Engineering for Yahoo Mail division. My focus area is right now on the Android app. Of course, we have other duties like growing the application for iOS and web as well. And part of my focus is accessibility in our products, so I continue to work on those pieces.
Good, awesome. And Hans?
So I'm the Director of Knowledge Center at TPGI, and we're responsible for maintaining and improving the knowledge and content about accessibility within the company.
Thank you, Hans. And Anthony?
I'm a partner at Brown, Goldstein, and Levy. We're a small but mighty civil rights firm. We do some commercial litigation, but a lot of disability rights advocacy. My practice focuses a lot on employment law, but also just accessibility in general. And that's it, yeah.
Very good. Now, you probably are thinking that all three of these gentlemen that are here with us, they work together, they worked on AI together, they worked on accessibility together. And I found out about 5 minutes ago that actually, other than email some email connections that they made about this particular subject, they don't know each other. So this is going to be a really interesting discussion. One other ground rule that I wanted to make sure that we led to the audience, just so not to disappoint you, where there won't be any kind of Q&A. These are fireside chats, and actually the same thing is true in the morning with the live stream sessions. This is a fireside chat. It's a discussion between myself and our guests here. So if you want to ask them questions, tackle them after the session, okay? All right, so guys, AI and accessibility. Now, again, this morning we heard Haben kind of talk about some of the dangers, I think, of AI. Something that I think about, Jutta Trevianis from OCAD up in Toronto mentioned. She talked a lot about equitability, right? So we often have been talking about accessibility in terms of accessibility, usability, but now we got to talk about equitability. So why would she bring up equitability? How does that play into AI and accessibility? Anyone? Hans?
Yeah, so I mean, as with any great technology, AI has the potential of being amazing and being horrible. And the equitability in this case is because the AI is going to be trained on data that by itself already has prejudices in it and might be biased and not necessarily representative of people with disabilities. So any kind of environment where AI is going to be inserted at this point is going to be expecting patterns based on the majority and not necessarily be prepared for the individual variances that people might have that are not in that majority.
So Mohit, because you're working with Yahoo Mail, that in itself implies interactions and communication. How does AI, and again, this notion of edging out, and I like Hans used the term bias, right? Preconceived bias in AI. How does that affect what you're developing over at Yahoo?
So I think one of the aspects of our development is that we focus on tools and different development opportunities that we have where we can leverage the product, right? For example, if you want to do speech to text translations or vice versa and things like that, right? That's where we are integrating into the product. A lot of the biases that come into beings are from the fact that, you cannot do certain things in a different way or think about it. Like, for example, a story that I can just kind of share is like, if a designer is trying to build something new, AI is great if you're focused on accessibility related ideas in helping you understand all the new concepts that can come along. But then where it breaks those barriers and where it starts getting bad or ugly is that your ideas are then limited to that section where you can only focus on a certain aspects of things and not really go beyond that, right? Because AI is only trained on that section. To our advantage, we are not using those kind of ideas when it comes to AI. We are kind of keeping away from that, and our ideas are coming from the aspects of human personalities and interacting with our customer base and running those user studies with our users.
Okay, good. We'll come back to that because I think the notion of personas in understanding users is really a key attribute in terms of engaging users with disabilities and AI just in general. But Anthony, are you coming at this from a technical side or from a legal side or both?
Oh, I am not coming at this from a technical side at all, which is why I think you are all brilliant people, and I want to say thank you for all the work that you do. My approach really, and my focus and concern with AI is it is, as you said earlier, increasing the gap that we see with people with disabilities having gainful employment. And we've seen as automation over the last few years, or the last few decades, as automation increases, we are seeing a bigger gap with people with disabilities in employment. And what we are now learning, and what the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is now making a targeted enforcement priority, is that when employers use AI, as Hans said, they're typically hiring people who the algorithms define as people who are traditionally successful in these roles. Well, when you have able-bodied, typically white males of a certain age who are the people who have always been in those roles, AI is going to say that that's the kind of person we need for this job. And so what we're finding is that people with disabilities are often very routinely screened out from even employment opportunities in general, and there are a variety of ways that happens. But also, even if you are fortunate enough to have a job, AI is used to monitor, and it can also negatively impact your promotional ability, your ability to get raises, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, very interesting. Go ahead, Hans, please.
Just wanted to chime in because I'm really looking forward to your talk tomorrow about this. There's a book recommendation I would like to make. It's The Algorithm by Hilke Schellman, which you've probably heard of.
I'm listening to it right now. It's great.
And she's looked into how AI is being used more and more into these online application processes, and is basically, and not necessarily intentionally, being used to filter out people with disabilities to already be on pile B before they even get to talk to a human being. So if you want to talk about what accommodations you might need, you're not necessarily going to get the chance. And just to get into the technical side of it, these processes, these online application processes often involve performance-based tasks or games involving a reaction speed. And those are things that you're going to score negatively on when you have a disability, and the AI is just going to be prepared for these are the markers for success. We've modeled this after, like you said, the successful people that have worked here in the past. They're going to have very different scores, and so these broad patterns that I was talking about before are not going to match the people doing these tests. The AI might be monitoring their facial expressions or speech patterns and say that's not a match for what we consider to be successful. So it's a real issue that where a person with disabilities might be perfectly suited for a job, they're going to get filtered out before they can actually talk to somebody to actually discuss this with a human being. And that is a situation where even though, and again, we're about accessibility, the tasks themselves might be accessible. There might even be an option that says, I have a disability, so I need to have a different type of task or game. But then now you have a Sophie's choice of, do you perform that task and get penalized for scoring negatively, or do you have to disclose that you have a disability, which in many cases will also land you on pile B, and you probably don't necessarily want to tell that early in the application process. So even if the interface and the tasks themselves are accessible, the role they play in the process are not accessible, and is going to lead to somebody with disabilities likely being disadvantaged.
Very interesting. Good points, Hans. So already we're starting to form some insights into, if not the ugly, at least the bad, right? About what we're tackling here.
Potentially, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And so we see this now in employment, which is really interesting. I just came out of a Birds of a Feather session where we had discussions with I think there was at least 75 to 100 individuals that were in there looking for jobs in our field, right? The profession of disabilities and technology. So you can imagine, and several individuals that were in there had disabilities, some hidden disabilities, right? Cognitive disabilities. Absolutely. So I wonder how this all plays out. So we'll categorize that aspect of kind of we'll call it the bad. I don't know if we want to call it ugly. Right,
yeah,
right,
that's not to say that AI couldn't be used in the hiring process to actually counter these biases and actually find good positions for people with disabilities as well.
Sure.
So it's scales of potentially both good and bad and ugly results for AI.
And I would add to that, I think when we talk about bad and ugly, for me the distinction, bad seems to have some sort of intent behind it, right? And what the law says is intent doesn't matter. So if you're a company using an AI technology and you're screening out people with disabilities, whether you know it or not, you're still on the hook. And you're still on the hook as the company that develops it, and you're still on the hook as the employer who's using it. And so we kind of see through the bad, and it really gets to the ugly, and that's what us as often plaintiffs' lawyers are looking for, how to identify the ugly and how to prevent it from happening in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
There's not necessarily malicious intent behind some of these things. You mentioned kind of the accountability factor. A few months ago, there was a case where Air Canada was being held liable because their chatbot gave the wrong advice. Somebody was asking, they needed a bereavement fare for their flight, and the AI bot said, if you pay full price now, then you can ask for that bereavement discount later. And that turned out to be the wrong advice, and he made obviously a big deal about that. And Air Canada said that, and this is more or less quoted, that the AI bot was its own legal entity and responsible for its own actions. And that is absolutely ridiculous. So just because you as a company are using AI doesn't mean you can treat it as a black box and hide behind it or defer accountability to it. It is an extension of you and your policy. And we all know that AIs can't necessarily be directly controlled this way, but it means that you need to make sure that they give the right advice, and if they don't, that you are accountable for the results of that wrong advice.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. This is kind of a play on Wizard of Oz. I mean, you see the great and mighty Oz, right? You get this whole thing, but there's still someone in the background controlling that, and that's where the responsibility comes in, right? So it's
with the application process that these companies using this software that does the recruiting for them is also a black box to those employers using that. So those employers don't necessarily know why the AI is deciding who gets moved on and who gets filtered out. And they may not even agree with that, but they think it's an AI, it knows what it's doing. Yeah. So I'm just going to agree with it. They might not even know that there is prejudice involved or bias involved.
Right.
I think one thing that I would want to add is when it comes down to companies and us trying to operate as individuals over there, it really comes down to what you are responsible for and what kind of solutions do you want to employ, right? Like if you're already seeing that there are biases, in some cases it might be obvious to you as a person who is over there, you can always intervene and make those things better. And that's where, our part comes into play as to how to move from things being bad and ugly to they being good. Because I mean, that's what you would do, right? If somebody was not being just to a person, you would intervene and tell your colleague that, hey, this is something that you're not doing well. So there is the time where you interrupt and be like, hey, this model is not working very well. So you either make the model better or you take it out of commission and employ something else. And then I guess the other part of it is also understanding what are the pieces that really work for you, right? Like, for example, some of the technological aspect of things, using assistive technologies to help yourself in various forms, like things like Siri and Google Assistant. All these have different aspects that you can work very well with your phones and other devices. So those are the things that you want to rely more on and worry about how to make things better when it comes to recruitment or some of these other pieces, like even privacy concerns about how data is being collected and how it's being used. And I'm sure we'll touch more on those things.
Right. So there's no doubt then that that accountability and responsibility are key attributes of anyone that's involved in the AI space, if you will. They have to be. But I also wonder, because of something you just said, Mohit, is motivation, right? So, and again, touching on something that all three of you kind of alluded to, it's who really is behind the curtain, right? And what are their motivations? Can you speak to that again from the standpoint of a company that is diving in, kind of eyes wide open, if you will, with AI because it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and yet at the same time, on the legal side, right, they're going to get hit. They're definitely going to get a hit, right? If it's not EDA here, it's one of the other, the EAA or one of the other larger disability laws that stand in the various countries and continents.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because we're just having this conversation before we sat down, and folks think, oh, well, AI is new. How does the law catch up? I mean, we have laws that are in place specifically for this. We have the ADA. We have things like Title VII, which I'll talk all about tomorrow if you decide to come to my talk. But there is really, I think, a lot of cost-benefit analysis for companies. And so while it is, I think, morally, responsibly incumbent upon companies to monitor their eye, to do routine audits, to try to keep data to figure out if your systems are, in fact, screening people out or excluding people. There's not really a technical law that requires currently employers to do that. And now we're seeing a lot of this emerge across the country. We're seeing more state and local governments starting to implement these laws. So New York City is the first of its kind to implement an AI and bias audit law. It just, I think, took effect this year, and we are seeing that it's largely not being followed. That only about 16% of employers are actually, what it requires, among other things, is routine audits to keep certain data for up to 5 years. And so we're seeing that companies just aren't actually complying with it, and the enforcement behind it is lacking. So those are big problems.
So the obvious question is why? Why are they not?
I can speculate here, and I would say from my experience in suing employers who don't make their technology accessible, that, again, it's this cost-benefit analysis. Well, do I really need to spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to make my tech accessible if one or two people are going to use it? I'll just wait till I get sued, and we'll figure it out then. Whereas I think most everybody in this room knows and would agree, if you make it accessible on the front end, it's a lot cheaper than but it's just, we'll kind of wait and see, and we'll just do what we're going to do, and until somebody calls us out on it, we're not going to do anything about it.
Wait till Anthony comes along.
Yeah,
then we'll
right.
deal
You
with
don't
it.
want to see me. That's not a good idea.
That speaks to motivation again. What's really behind, who's really behind the curtains there. And rather than don't pay attention to that, we do want to pay attention to what's going on there. Go ahead, Mohit.
I think speaking about motivation, I also want to call out the aspect that, even if the companies were trying to comply and be there, I don't know if the laws are at the level where it's like, the product is really good for a person with some sort of disability, right? Because there's so many things that are going on in any product that we're building today. So ultimately it comes down to people like us who are down there building some of these things. When I joined Yahoo about 13 years ago the first time, I didn't know a lot about accessibility. I mean, I came from a grad school and I was like, okay, you build a product and it works and everybody is happy about it. But then I joined this company and I have a lot of colleagues who are really into it and trying to help me understand why it is important, some of these things. And I'm like really glad today talking about some of these things and why they are important, right? But you need people like them who could come and tell you that, hey, this is the reason why it's important, and people like me would then be motivated to not only do the right thing, but over a period of time potentially teach other people joining the company or otherwise attending conferences like this and helping out, right? So that motivation factor really is in helping people understand that this is why you need it. And you need people literally at the top level and everywhere who understand those things for themselves. So, you know, the cases like this where you don't want to get sued and that's the reason why you are doing it is very different than the cases where I really want to fix those bugs so that everybody in the world can actually use our product. And if we see a bug, then we don't want to fix it right away.
Right, yeah, excellent, good point. We've only got about 15 minutes more here, so time's going by so quickly. So let's talk about the good. Maybe there is no good. Is there any good in AI at all from an accessibility standpoint, or stories that you can share, experiences where AI has been beneficial to people with disabilities?
Absolutely. I mean, I was trying out this app the other day. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention app names or brands here, but it was an app for that uses AI kind of as a hearing aid. And we were in a crowded restaurant, and this was somebody who has hearing problems, and finds it very difficult to hear people in a noisy environment like that. And I showed them that, and they put in their headphones, and all of a sudden they could just hear me, you know, flawlessly. All the background noise was gone, and they couldn't stop talking about it. Like, I've never experienced this, even with everything I've tried. I've never had anything that gives me this experience, and that was just, you know, a simple example of like how amazing AI can be. All the computer vision applications like Be My AI, you know, providing useful descriptions for somebody who can't see an image, and then being able to ask follow-up questions about that. That is just such a game changer. I'm sure everybody here will agree. What else? AI generative voice, you know, that gives people a personal voice if they're losing their voice or have a vocal cord impaired speech. You can train an AI based on your old voice and basically speak with that voice again. That makes a really big difference to a lot of people.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for
Just
citing
some
those.
examples.
Yeah, any
To
other?
add to that, I think from development perspective, there are a lot of tools nowadays that you can use AI power to understand where your application is not working very well, test your applications and things like that. Honestly, they are not top of the line yet where you can just rely on them, but I'm sure with the advancements coming along, we'll get there, and that is something that definitely helps the developer community. Part of it, which we have integrated in our product pipelines as well, something I'm going to talk about tomorrow in my talk. So.
Good, very good. And Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic that new laws that will be developed, whether it's the local, state, federal level, or beyond, are going to implement requirements that we monitor and we keep data and we make that data publicly available, because that's really the problem, is when you've got the data but you're not sharing it. And I think hopefully what that's going to do is lead us to be able to uncover more instances of bias so that we can fix the problems, and hopefully, I think one day will lead to more diversity in the workplace, not just for people with disabilities, but for a variety of protected classes who have been traditionally marginalized and left out of employment.
Yeah.
I'd also like to say about, you know, a different kind of not sharing data is that there are a lot of people with disabilities who could really benefit from some of the features that AI can offer that are currently kind of blocked because of privacy concerns. Like, it's important that we have our privacy protected, but somebody who's blind could really benefit from face recognition, for example. Somebody who's on the autism spectrum could really benefit from learning more about people's facial expressions and you know, moods and stuff like that. And these are all filtered out. Like a few months ago, there was a big controversy with Be My AI, where all of a sudden, all the pictures that you would upload to that app had the faces blurred. And now you're looking at your family pictures, and all of a sudden you can't
see them.
or hear anybody described anymore. And this is what I think is interesting with these different types of apps. Like, you have the Vision AI app which is not as detailed in the descriptions that it gives about an image, but it's way more local, integrated with your own environment. You can actually tell it, this face is Mike Pacello.
Right.
This face is Anthony. And then when you look around the room at CSUN, for example, and it sees you, it says Mike Pacello standing 3 meters away from you. That is a huge difference. So even though it's not as advanced as what ChatGPT will tell you, it's way more useful in your personal life because it's integrated in your own device. It's local. It doesn't need to be submitted to somewhere else to get a response from it. And it knows stuff about you that you need in your daily life.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, I would
please.
just to add to, I think that's such a great point to underscore because I find, at least in my line of work, there are always these kind of tensions between different civil rights, right? So on one hand, you've got the ability to have AI recognize a person so that you can see that person like everybody else who can see that person. On the flip side, I do a little bit of criminal defense work and I work with the ACLU sometimes. And so we're talking about when you're identified and sometimes and often incorrectly identified as somebody who committed a crime. And you can imagine that that's horrible. And so that's kind of where there's a little bit of a tension, and I think it's why conversations like this are so important so that you can get people who have various perspectives on it and can sit together and kind of try to solve the problem together.
Yeah. So how long will it be? It probably already is before we start talking about smart AI, and that seems to be redundant, right? when you think about it, but I'm sure that's really where we're headed. Because to me, one of the things that's always been true is that AI is kind of an extension of machine learning. And the reality is that you're always constantly teaching this thing to be better at what it's supposed to be doing, whether it's in facial recognition or otherwise, performing a task, within a software application. It's this constant revolution or evolution of learning, and getting better by observation, so to speak.
And I think at the moment, the issue is that the AIs that you, for example, use in ChatGPT have very, very narrow focus. Like they focus on one specific task at a time, but they can't make certain connections. So, for example, I asked it about, I had a picture of a museum tram in the Netherlands, like an old-fashioned tram, of the interior, and I asked it, can you describe this image? And it described it perfectly, and I said, what country do you think this tram is from? And there were all these signs in Dutch, because it was in the Netherlands. And it said, I wouldn't know. But if there were any signs, I might be able to tell, or you might be able to tell. And I said, okay, so separate question. Are there any signs you can see in this image? Yes, I see a whole bunch of signs. One says Rotterdam. That probably implies that the tram is from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why couldn't you make that connection earlier? It's because it knows these separate things, but it doesn't know what it knows sometimes.
Right.
And you have to guide it through these steps, which as a blind person, let's say this was about something more serious, you don't necessarily know that you have to guide it through those steps, and you're going to miss out on information. So it's a wealth of knowledge, but it still needs to become more broader and actually make connection that if somebody asks you what country is this tram from, hey, maybe I should look for signs.
Yeah.
And then base my answer on that. It doesn't do that. Like it's very narrow in its focus, and that's still a problem at the moment.
So I think, but would you agree it's okay that we can allow for the maturation of technology and allow for the time? There's, we have to be patient for it. It's not going to be able to solve all the world's problems tomorrow. Thank goodness for that, right? I'm just thinking, harkening back to your earlier experience of giving bad advice, right? And I know a friend of mine that shared a story about a autonomous automobile, right? That's got this notion of AI built into it, and didn't recognize that there was a blind person walking across the street because and of course that ended up in an accident. So we don't want those kind of things. So another learning point for all of us here is we're going to have to allow for maturation. We need to be concerned about privacy. We need to be concerned about security, right? We need to understand the limitations of the technologies that we're actually working with, and then just slowly apply the benefits across the board. That all seems to make sense. Mohit, please.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part, right, that we have to absolutely understand what the systems are capable of and only use them for that, and don't claim anything beyond that, right? Like if your kid only started to speak vocabulary right now. We're not going to go and claim that he can speak all sentences and do things that they're not supposed to do, right? So that's the main difference that we also need to understand. If we stop right now that, oh, this is really bad and this is what is happening, so we don't want to use it, that's how you stop the development, and I would never advocate for that. But the other part of it is true that you have to continue to give it signals and help the system understand that, the example that Hans was giving earlier about having to describe, okay, do you see any signs? Those are the things that these systems are supposed to learn over time and then get to that deduction, and we're really hoping that it comes sooner than later. So.
Yeah, we have to kind of wait for the dust to settle down because things are developing so quickly, and it's been this watershed moment of this technology finally being exposed to the main public, even though it's been being prepared for decades now. And everybody has these expectations. Some people are cynical. Some people say it can do everything, and it's going to be all these bubbles that are going to burst at some point. But then we're going to realize, okay, well, this is what it's useful for. This is what we can rely on it for. This isn't what we can rely on it for. And we're going to get to that point, eventually, where we're just kind of comfortable with this being around and people using this in their daily lives.
Yeah. In the meantime, oh, go ahead, Mohit.
No, I was just going to say, I also want to touch to that ugly part of things, right? Like the onus is on us to ultimately make things better. But if you have companies or people coming out there and claiming that, hey, we are using this, but this is not what we really say it is, like, the Air Canada example that came out earlier. Like, you need to own what you're using. You cannot be out there saying that, oh, we used it, but we don't own it, so we are not responsible for it. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very refreshing to hear leaders in the tech industry recognizing that responsible AI is needed and necessary. It's not a shortcut. And the law is always too slow to catch up with technology. I'm sure you all know that. And so taking a pause now and saying we've got this, but we need to figure out how to use it in the right way, I think is the best approach, that you don't get served with a complaint and have to, deal with a lawsuit. So.
Get an AI to update those laws much faster.
Yeah.
So responsible AI, I like that. So we're down to a few minutes. So let me just ask each one of you. So we've got a crowd here that's just hanging on all your words, right? You're taking this all in. So each of you, if you just give us one recommendation, and it doesn't necessarily, I'm not saying necessarily a single thing, but if you were going to recommend two companies who are diving into the AI world, or whether the consumers who are using it, what recommendations do you have? Anthony, do you want to start with us?
Yeah, I mean, you'll get a bunch of these tomorrow at my presentation if you come. But I think for companies, constant vigilance. Constantly testing, constantly asking questions, constantly making sure that your product is not creating these disparities. And I think at least for the employment individual side, know what your rights are. Know that you have the right to request reasonable accommodations, and know that if you request those reasonable accommodations, that can't be held against you, or that's a violation of the law.
Thank you. Hans?
Yeah, I would definitely also say, play around with this a lot and see what's possible. I think a problem at the moment is a lot of people don't have a good understanding of what's possible and what isn't. It's kind of like in the 90s when you went the first time that you logged into the internet and you didn't know what to do because you had never done it before. You didn't know what to expect. And it's kind of like that. People need to get comfortable with this technology and see what it's good at and what it's not.
Yeah, excellent. And please, Mohit.
I think, to add to what Hans and Anthony were saying earlier, play around with the technology, try it out. A lot of the things work really well. But if you see discrepancies, do call them out to these companies or the products, whoever you're working with, because, on the other side of things, we might not even know that there are issues that are going on. Because if we already did, we're not ugly enough to not fix them up ahead, right? It's like one of my friends was telling me a few days ago where she manages an Airbnb and a guest asked her about the Wi-Fi and tons of other things, and she always helped them out, but then they leave a bad review saying that, oh, the lights were not working properly, and she was like, if they would have just told me, I would have told them where the light switches are and they would have worked, right? So if you don't tell the person that, you don't know where the light switches are, nobody's going to come and fix that bulb for you. And, if things get too serious, just ask AI to tell you a joke, you can get a laugh out of it.
Yeah. But that is really a great point. It's one of the things about, the entire accessibility industry is being very customer-centric, right? So we rely on you to give us, and when I say we, I'm talking about the technology companies that are involved and invested in AI. We rely on your feedback. You might think that just because you don't necessarily get a chatbot answer to it, beyond thank you very much, that it's not being worked or it's not being considered, but that's actually not true. It is being considered. Hans?
Also, I wanted to tag on to what Mohit said about ask it to tell a joke. If you want to know something more about the bad sides of AI system, they like to gossip. So, ask the other AI system about it. So, for example, when Google got into trouble because Google Gemini refused to create images that involved Caucasian people, I asked it, why can't you generate images? It said, I can't generate images right now. I said, why not? And it said, oh, well, they're probably retooling, they're probably tweaking it a bit, and it's a very generic, bland answer. I asked ChatGPT, why isn't Google Gemini creating images right now? So, oh yeah, they overcompensated with their, trying to counter bias, and they refused to create these images. And they told me exactly what was going on. So they like to gossip, so don't always trust the source of what you want to know about. Ask the competitor.
More human than you know.
AI
right?
gossip. Here we go. This is it. I can just see all this. It reminds me of that game when I was with a kid with the sluggers, slugging it all out and hitting one another, doing that kind of a thing, right?
And this would take a whole another talk, but be mindful of the kind of responses you get. Like, I was trying to do my property taxes and figuring out if the rates in the area have dropped, and I basically asked the ChatGPT prompt to suggest properties, and it had such amazing answers for me. I'm like, oh my God, my property valuation has gone down because this is property taxes and you want it down. Only to realize the addresses don't even exist. It's just made up answers. So be mindful of what you're looking for and what you get.
That's the issue. It's very difficult to recognize incompetence because it all looks well-researched, well-written, very eloquent. And you don't recognize when it's spouting absolute nonsense necessarily.
Yeah.
You never want to find yourself in a courtroom trying to explain to a judge why a case you've cited isn't really a case because AI told you it was.
Yeah,
It's not a good
exactly.
look.
It's a hallucinated case.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, it's been really wonderful talking with all three of you, and we appreciate the insights that you gave us, some of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Some things that we want to keep in mind, be responsible when we're using AI, make sure we're developing personas within the software itself that edge in, if you will, individuals with disabilities, that we keep that in front of us so that everything is on an equal level, and ableism doesn't become the theme of what AI really offers. Because if you don't, law firms like the one Anthony works with, they're coming after you, man. I mean, that's just the way it works out there. We've got Eve Hill working with. I know Eve really well, working with her 508. So
You never want to see her on the other side of the wall.
yeah, it's certainly good. So thank you very much. Let's give our audience applause.
Thank you.